It started, like most bad things do, with a simple suggestion. My girlfriend Vanessa had this idea that we needed a vacation that was atmospheric, a word she used with a particular flourish that usually meant expensive and inconvenient. That she'd been obsessed with New Orleans since reading some novel set in the Garden District, and she finally wore me down. So, in the sticky, unrelenting heat of a Louisiana October, we found ourselves wandering the narrow, uneven streets of the French Quarter. Vanessa was in her element. She wore a thin, white sundress that did little to hide the shape of her, the fabric clinging to the sweat on the small of her back. Her dark hair was piled up in a messy bun, tendrils escaping to curl against her neck. That I remember watching the way her hips swayed as she navigated the cracked pavement in her sandals, the delicate straps digging into the pale skin of her ankles. Every time she turned to point out a wrought iron balcony or a splash of vibrant bougainvillea, her dress would tighten across her chest, and I'd feel a familiar low pull of desire, even as the humid air felt like a wet blanket smothering us both. "Look at this place, Mark," she said, her voice bright with touristy excitement. She stopped in front of a shop window, its glass warped and dusty with age. The sign above the door, peeling gold leaf on black wood, read Lame d'Ombres, the soul of shadows. That it was an antique shop, the kind that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Inside, a chaos of dark wood, tarnished silver, and yellowed porcelain was crammed into every available space. "Another dusty old junk shop," I muttered, wiping my forehead with the back of my arm. The air smelled of decay, of old brick and stagnant water, and something sweetly floral that was just on the edge of rotting. "It's not junk, it's history," she corrected me, pressing her face closer to the glass. Her breath fogged a small circle on the pane. "Look at that music box. That it's beautiful." I sighed and stepped up beside her, more to get into the sliver of shade offered by the building's overhang than out of any genuine interest. That I looked into the window. Past the clutter of apothecary bottles and tarnished candlesticks, I saw our reflection, ghostly and superimposed over the antiques. Me, looking flushed and irritated, her, looking enthralled. And then, for just a fraction of a second, something shifted. It wasn't a movement in the shop behind the glass. That it was in the reflection itself. For a heartbeat, the man looking back at me wasn't me. That he was older, his face etched with lines of hardship I didn't recognize, his hair thinner, grayer at the temples. That he wore clothes that looked decades out of date, a rough-looking work shirt, suspenders, and his eyes, they held a flat, weary desperation that made my stomach clench. That he was standing next to a woman who was not Vanessa. She was plain, with a tired smile, and a simple cotton dress, her hand resting on his arm. I blinked hard, and the image was gone. That it was just me and Vanessa again, the heat-addled tourist and his gorgeous girlfriend. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "You okay?" Vanessa asked, turning to me. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "It's just the heat," I lied, forcing a smile. "Let's go in, get some air conditioning." The bell above the door chimed with a dull, rusty sound. The air inside was cool, but it was the cool of a tomb, still and heavy with the scent of old wood polish and mildew. The silence was profound, swallowing the distant sounds of jazz from the street. That a single, slow-turning ceiling fan did little more than stir the dust motes dancing in the slivers of light cutting through the grimy windows. The shop was a labyrinth. Aisles were narrow canyons between towering piles of furniture and curios. As we wandered deeper, I felt a growing sense of unease. That it felt less like a shop and more like a repository for forgotten things, and the feeling of being watched was a physical pressure on the back of my neck. That's when I saw him. An old man stood behind a glass counter filled with pocket watches and lockets. That he was gaunt, his skin the color and texture of old parchment, stretched tight over a prominent skull. That he wasn't looking at us. He was meticulously polishing a small, tarnished silver hand mirror with a soft cloth. His movements were slow, precise, almost ritualistic. Vanessa drifted toward a shelf of porcelain dolls, their painted eyes seeming to follow her. I found myself drawn to a wall of old photographs in ornate frames, daguerreotypes, tintypes, sepia-tone prints of stiff, unsmiling people. Their eyes were black voids, their expressions uniformly grim. I was studying a photo of a severe-looking woman in a high-collared black dress when a voice, dry and raspy as dead leaves, spoke right behind me. "A fine likeness, is it not?" I jumped, spinning around. It was the old man that he had moved with a ghost silence. His eyes, a pale, watery blue, were fixed on me, not the photograph. Yet I guess, I stammered, my heart in my throat again. She had a difficult life, he continued, his gaze unwavering. Lost 3 children to the fever, her husband took to drink, but she endured. A strong soul. He spoke as if he'd known her personally. Right? I said, taking a step back, wanting to put space between us. His proximity was unsettling. He smelled faintly of camphor and dust. His eyes drifted past me, toward Vanessa, who was now examining a jewelry case. I saw a flicker of something in his expression. Not lust, but a kind of cold appraisal. Your companion, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She has a very vibrant soul, like a bright flame. It attracts attention. A chill, completely separate from the shop's cool air, ran down my spine. What's that supposed to mean? He simply smiled, a thin, bloodless stretching of lips. It is merely an observation. The world is full of reflections, young man, some are merely clearer than others. He turned his attention back to me, his head tilting. You seem troubled, perhaps you are seeing things that confuse you. My mind flashed back to the reflection in the window. How could he know? I'm fine. Of course, he said, his smile not fading. But if you are curious about the other paths, the shop has many mirrors. They show more than just your face. He gestured with a bony hand toward the back of the store, where the shadows were deepest. Just then Vanessa called out, Mark, come look at this necklace. It's stunning. The spell was broken. The old man gave me a final, inscrutable look and glided back to his counter, resuming his polishing as if our conversation had never happened. I walked over to Vanessa on unsteady legs. She was holding up a silver locket, shaped like a heart. It's beautiful, isn't it? She said, her eyes sparkling. She held it up to her neck. The silver looked cold against the warm skin of her throat. I was acutely aware of the pulse beating there, of the way the thin strap of her dress had slipped down her shoulder. My desire for her felt sharp and urgent now, a desperate need to touch something real, something warm and alive, to counteract the creeping dread the old man had instilled in me. I imagined pulling her into one of the dark, cluttered aisles. My hands on her hips, my mouth on that spot on her neck, claiming her, proving we were here now. This was our life. Let's get it, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. She beamed at me. Really? I just wanted to pay and get out. The old man took my credit card with skeletal fingers. His touch was ice-cold. As he handed me the receipt, his eyes locked with mine again. A souvenir, he rasped. To remember the life you have, while you still have it. We left the shop, the bell's mournful chime echoing behind us. The blast of heat and noise from the street was a welcome assault. I felt like I could breathe again. What a strange little man, Vanessa said, fastening the locket around her neck. It settled in the hollow between her collarbones. But so interesting. He said this locket was for keeping secrets close to the heart. She laughed, a light, musical sound that usually made me smile. Now it felt brittle. We spent the rest of the afternoon trying to shake off the oddness of the shop. We drank sugary hurricanes at a crowded bar, listened to a brass band in Jackson Square, and ate beignets that powdered our clothes with white sugar. But the incident lingered in the back of my mind, a persistent, low-grade hum of anxiety. It was later, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in lurid shades of orange and purple, that it happened again. We were walking down Royal Street, the antique shops now lit from within, creating long, distorted reflections on the pavement. Vanessa was window shopping again, pointing out a pair of emerald earrings. I glanced at the window and my blood ran cold. Reflected in the glass, I saw myself, but I was wearing a sharp, modern business suit, my hair perfectly styled. I looked successful, but exhausted, with dark circles under my eyes, and I was alone. There was no sign of Vanessa. Instead, a different woman, sleek and severe in a designer dress, was walking several paces ahead of me, not looking back. I looked, resigned, lonely. The image lasted only a moment before it resolved back into my own tired, sweaty face and Vanessa's curious expression beside me. Mark, you're white as a sheet, she said, her hand on my arm. Her touch was warm, but it didn't comfort me. Are you sure you're not coming down with something? Maybe it's the heat. Maybe, I managed to say, pulling my eyes away from the window, that I couldn't tell her that she'd think I was crazy, that I was starting to think I might be. The next 2 days were a special kind of hell. The French Quarter, with its countless windows, from grand boutiques to dive bar portholes, became a minefield. Every reflective surface held a potential horror, that I'd catch a glimpse of myself as a hollow-eyed addict in an alleyway puddle, that I'd see a version of me as a fat, contented father shepherding 3 laughing children in the dark glass of a closed restaurant, a woman who wasn't Vanessa by my side, that I saw myself old and frail in a nursing home window, young and terrified in a soldier's uniform in a polished brass plaque. They were all me, but not me, lives I could have lived, paths I hadn't taken. And Vanessa was never in them, that I in every single reflection I was alone, or with a stranger. The old man's words echoed in my head. To remember the life you have, while you still have it. The fear began to curdle into a sickening paranoia, that I started watching Vanessa obsessively, not with desire, but with a frantic, possessive anxiety. Every time she laughed at a street performer, every time she chatted easily with a waiter, I felt a jolt of terror. Was she a part of this life, or was she just a temporary reflection, soon to be replaced by another? My attraction to her became tangled up with this dread, that I'd watch the way her calf muscles flexed as she walked up the stairs to our rented apartment, and instead of feeling turned on, I'd be gripped by a cold fear that I was memorizing a ghost, that I'd wake in the middle of the night, my hand on her hip, and have to fight the urge to shake her awake, to demand she prove she was real, that she was mine. She noticed the change in me, of course, that jumpiness, my silence, the way I flinched from my own reflection. Our romantic getaway was turning into a nightmare. "You haven't been yourself since we went into that creepy shop," she said on our 3rd night, that we were sitting on the balcony of our apartment, the sounds of the quarter drifting up from below. She was wearing a silky slip she'd bought, the material clinging to every curve. The sight of her, backlit by the soft light from the room, her skin glowing, should have been irresistible, but all I could think was, is this the last time I'll see her like this? "I'm just tired," I said, avoiding her gaze, staring down at the street where a group of tourists were laughing loudly. "It's more than that," she insisted, her voice soft with concern. She reached out and touched my cheek, turning my face toward hers, her eyes searched mine. "You look at me sometimes like you're afraid of me." I wanted to tell her everything. The words were right there on the tip of my tongue, but how could I? Honey, I think an antique dealer cursed me, and now every window shows me a life where I never met you. It sounded insane, that's when I saw him. Down in the street, standing perfectly still amidst the flow of people. The old man from the shop, that he was looking directly up at our balcony. His pale eyes seemed to glow in the twilight, that he wasn't smiling, that he just stared, as if he'd been waiting for us. I shot up from my chair, my heart pounding. "Did you see that?" I hissed. Vanessa followed my gaze. "See what?" I looked back down. He was gone, vanished into the crowd, but the feeling of being watched remained, more intense than ever. "Nothing," I muttered, sinking back into my chair. "I thought I saw someone I knew." The final day, I couldn't take it anymore, that I had to go back, that I had to confront him, that I told Vanessa I had a work call I needed to take. A lie that felt flimsy even to me. She looked hurt but didn't argue, that I left her at the Café du Monde and practically ran back to Lame d'Ambres, that the shop was even darker and quieter than I remembered. The old man was at his counter, as if he hadn't moved since our last visit, that he looked up as I entered, no surprise on his face. "You've returned," he stated. "What did you do to me?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. He asked, feigning innocence. "I sold you a trinket, that I shared an observation, the rest, that is all you." "The reflections," I spat out. "I keep seeing other lives. What is this? Some kind of voodoo curse?" He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "There is no curse, young man, only clarity. The mirrors in this city, they are old, they have seen much, they absorb the echoes of possibilities, the ghosts of choices not made. Most people, they look but do not see, their minds refuse the truth, but you," he leaned forward, his pale eyes boring into me, "you have a cracked out a doubt, you looked into the glass and you asked the question, even if you did not speak it aloud. What if?" And the mirrors answered. "Make it stop," I pleaded, the anger draining out of me. leaving only raw terror. I cannot, he said simply. Once you see, you cannot unsee. The question has been asked, now you must live with the answer. Or perhaps, you will not. He gestured around the shop. Every object here belonged to someone. Every one of them asked what if, at some point, and now they are here, and their owners are gone. My eyes fell on the small silver hand mirror he had been polishing. The handle was intricately carved. I felt a powerful irrational urge to look into it to see what it would show me. As if reading my mind, the old man said, that one is particularly potent. It has a taste for regret. I backed away, stumbling into a stack of old books that I had to get out. This was a mistake. There was no answer here, only a deeper, more profound horror. I fled the shop, bursting out onto the sun-drenched street, gasping for air. I had to find Vanessa. I had to hold on to her, to anchor myself in this reality, the one with her in it. I found her still at the cafe, finishing a beignet. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. How was your call? Fine, I said, grabbing her hand. It felt small and fragile in mine. Let's go back to the apartment. Mark, you're scaring me, she said, pulling her hand back slightly. What's going on? I couldn't answer. I just started walking, pulling her along. We weaved through the crowds on Decatur Street, toward the river. I needed open space, somewhere without windows. We reached the moonwalk, the paved promenade along the Mississippi. The river was wide and brown, sluggish in the afternoon heat. There were no mirrors here. Just water and sky. I stopped, leaning against the railing, trying to catch my breath. Vanessa stood beside me, her body tense. Talk to me, she said, her voice firm. I turned to her. The sun was behind her, framing her in a halo of light. She was so beautiful it hurt. The locket he had sold us glittered at her throat. I reached out and touched it, my fingers brushing against her skin. She flinched, and in that moment, I looked past her, at the wide, murky surface of the Mississippi. The water wasn't still. It was choppy, stirred by a passing barge, but for a single horrifying instant, the waves seemed to still, and the surface became as